It's time for the Property Podcast, where every week tens of thousands of property investors, new and experienced, join together to get news, knowledge and laughs at our expense. With me, Rob Bence.
And me, Rob Dix. Join us every Thursday morning for your weekly dose of property ideas and motivation. Then head over to our website at thepropertypodcast.com to keep the conversation going. Now though, let's get started.
Hello and welcome to the Property Podcast. I'm Rob B. With me, as always, is Rob D. Good morning, Rob. How are you today?
Good morning. I'm very well indeed, thank you. This week we are asking, can the property super bubble be stopped? Lots of ideas for the solution, if you need a solution, to London house prices. Also, we've got a great resource of the week. And in our news story, we're talking about why Ed Miliband doesn't like you.
So yes, all of that is coming up on episode 60. But before we get going, let's give thanks and praise to our wonderful listeners who've left us some 5-star reviews. Sarah from Southampton says, addicted. I have a little property investment experience, but the discovery of this podcast was the beginning of a newfound love for bricks and mortar. Love the positivity of the Robs and the style which they deliver the content is easy, fun and informative. Keep up the great work. A huge fan. Thank you, Sarah. Harry says, great podcast, fantastic podcast that has reignited my long-held belief that property is the answer to long-term wealth creation. Rob and Rob cut straight to the issues and are dispensable, valuable advice without sounding condescending. A must listen for anyone interested in property. Thank you very much, Harry. And finally, this week, Hornage says, resource of the year. I've just started my own property journey into the world of property investment, and this podcast has opened my eyes to more than just flipping or letting below market value properties. As a property manager for a large Scottish letting agency, I've been recommending a podcast to a lot of our landlords. Keep up the good work, guys. Dale. Well, thank you very much, everyone. We really do appreciate the reviews.
Yeah, we do. And I recognised a couple of names there from the Property Hub. So it's nice to see people interacting in there as well. Always great to hear from you. Thank you so much for getting involved. It's episode 60, which is hard to believe. And it's your support that's kept us going this far. We absolutely love getting the reviews. And we love interacting with people in the hub as well.
We do. So, Rob, we're normally here, there and everywhere, but it's slightly quieter week for this week on our update. So I'll just add that the role that I mentioned for Client Services Manager RMP, we're about to close applications on that. So if you're listening to this when it goes out, you've probably got the weekend to get your application in if you're interested. Or, if you're experienced and you love what you do already, but you know someone you think, wow, that would be a great opportunity for them to get into property. Give them a nudge. They've got a few days left. We'll link to it in the show notes, which is thepropertyhub.net/bubble. This week's episode's notes are thepropertyhub.net/bubble. And the link to the job that's available at RMP at the moment will be there.
Yes, do not delay. Great opportunity if you want to get into the property industry. What better way than working with Rob Bence? That is the question. The answer is there is no better way. So make sure you get your applications in quickly. So, Rob, our news story this week, we've done some silly ones in the past, but this week we've got quite a substantial news story. This was the news that Labour, they've announced a new policy, and effectively they want to introduce rent controls. And so critics of this have immediately sort of said this is going back to a 1970s style. Whenever you want to make anything bad, you say 1970s style. There are a lot of critics, but then there's a lot of popular support for this as well, but it's certainly a controversial policy.
Yeah, it's very controversial. We have to be careful, Rob, because we're not a political broadcast, but it's clear that ourselves and this audience have a clear bias towards property. So when a political party goes effectively anti-investor, anti-landlord, then they're not going to make themselves popular, but then maybe they're going after that popular vote with all the renters. There's millions of them, so maybe this is just a way to get some votes in. Is it a good policy? Well, we're going to be very biased, so maybe not take our opinions forward on this one. But Labour has to come up with some vote-winning policies. And this, they believe, is what's going to get them there. They first attacked the current government on the economy, and now the economy is strengthened. They then attacked the government on living costs because inflation was high, but now wage inflation is above normal inflation. So they've had to change attack, and this is their latest effort. Is it a good policy? I'll let you decide. Rent controls, being told how long your tenants have to stay there, doesn't sound like a progressive policy to me. But then again, I am biased.
I think it's hard to assess, because the thing that really struck me about this policy is they've done the politician's normal trick of announcing something with no detail whatsoever. So it's more of a headline or a soundbite than a policy at the moment. And so I heard the shadow housing minister on the radio who just did not have a clue and just couldn't answer any questions about it, and was debating with a guy from the Resident Landlords Association who did really well, actually. It is hard to assess when you've got no detail. But I think the thing is, like, one of the proposals is they want tenancies to automatically be 3 years. And the thing is that landlords would love tenancies to be 3 years. No one wants tenants sort of going in and out every 6 months. It's a hassle. It costs money. Everyone essentially wants the same thing. But it's just a case of setting the incentives such as it works for all parties. And if you've got a bad tenant or a bad landlord, because there are both, you can take action and you can get out of the situation. But I think you've got to be very careful about sort of making these broad, sweeping changes that are going to affect everything, probably have a load of unintended consequences. It seems to me like it's a big, popular announcement, but then it would end up getting cut back, watered down, and all that kind of thing anyway. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just a cynic. It remains to be seen, and we'll see if more detail on these proposals comes out over the coming weeks and months.
So surely you're not applying, Rob, that the politicians have made up a headline and not actually thought through the detail.
Well, it's a novel suggestion, I know, but but who knows? That's how it struck me. I mean, you know, it's a great thing to say. Like, landlords are easy to pick on, and you always get the high-profile cases of where landlords have treated people badly. So it's an easy headline. If there is a problem, is solving it as easy as coming up with a headline? We'll see.
Okay, so let's leave that one there. It's always difficult to cover politics. So let's move on to our topic of the week, Rob. And we're blowing bubbles this week.
Yeah, so we're not just blowing bubbles, we're blowing super bubbles, which is what...
Super bubbles, I like that. Good media spin.
Yeah, so it's not exciting and terrifying and just generally kind of newsworthy enough to have a housing bubble. We now have to have a super bubble. God, I'm in real cynic mode this morning. So this is from a news story from The Guardian, which we will link to in the show notes, where they basically list lots of suggestions that have come up about how to calm the super bubble. It's important to make clear that this article and the debate in general is talking about London specifically. That's where, if you haven't noticed a bubble where you live, it could be because this is kind of a London phenomenon at the moment, although it is rippling out. The data is apparently that asking prices in London are 40% higher than their previous peak. And according to Rightmove, asking prices in London went up by 7% in March alone. So it is a huge increase, and it's suggesting that something needs to be done about it. And there's all kinds of measures. We're going to run through the ideas in the Guardian article, and then we're going to add some of our own at the end as well.
We are. So let's have a look at them. Number 1, build more houses. I bet this article took a long time to put together, Rob. Build more houses. We need 250,000 new houses every year, according to the Barker Report. And if you haven't listened to Do Property Prices Double Every 10 Years, that episode we did a few weeks back, go and listen to it because we talk about supply and demand. So it links really nicely to this. But the Barker Report said we need 250,000 homes new year. Now, last year, people would say it was pretty positive for property. We built 109,000, so not even half. And since the Barker Report came out 10 years ago, we've never, ever hit that 250 target. So we're constantly falling behind. And that 250 is just to keep up with supply. We covered this in that episode. So all I can add to this is that everyone agrees we need new homes, but nobody really wants it near them. But that links on to our second suggestion here, Rob.
Yeah, this is the thing. Everyone knows we need more houses, but that's obviously not an easy thing to do, or it would have already been done. One suggestion that's been made is to create more garden cities. So point 2, more garden cities, is effectively the same as point 1, building more houses. But the article mentions that there's a garden city that's being planned near Ebbsfleet, which is going to create 15,000 properties. But clearly we need more. Whether that's the way to do it or not, I don't know. But it is clear that we do need more houses of some kind somewhere. However the best way of doing that is, something needs to happen, because whatever else you do, if you've got supply and demand out of whack, you're going to have to start manipulating things a lot to bring prices back into line.
Yeah, and more garden cities is all well and good, but like the Ebbsfleet announcement, so the Chancellor mentioned that they'll build a garden city of 15,000 homes in Ebbsfleet. Well, we've already seen that we need 250,000 a year. So the odd garden city of 15,000 isn't going to make much of a dent. Nice idea in principle, but a lot more needs to be done. So next, changes to stamp duty. Ricks has suggested that exempting over 65s from stamp duty when downsizing to make more effective use of housing stock. So what the point's making is when people have reached retirement age and they may feel that, okay, so people have left home and they've got a lot of space, so probably more than they need, they're reluctant to move on because of stamp duty and the costs involved. So getting rid of it would allow them to move on, release up housing stock, which is much needed, which would help the market. I can't pick any fault with this one, Rob. I think it's actually a good idea.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw an overhaul of stamp duty in some form over the next few years, because it's weird in the way that it works and that it creates such distortions around the points where it kicks in. It seems like it could be used as a more effective tool. So yeah, that seems like it could be a reasonably good suggestion. It's not going to solve the problem on its own, but it's something. Another suggestion that has been made, number 4, capital gains tax on all house sales. This is going to be an unpopular one. At the moment, you don't have to pay capital gains tax when you sell your primary residence. That's exempt. It's only on investment properties. But the proposal is that that's changed, so you have to pay capital gains tax on any house transaction. This is how it works in the US and some other countries as well. In the US, you have to pay capital gains tax on your own home, but if you're a single seller, the first $250,000 is exempted. And if you're a couple, it's $500,000. So what that means in practice is that the majority of people don't end up paying anything. Would this be an effective policy? I don't know, but I can't see it happening just because it would be so unpopular with Middle England.
It would, and it kind of made the last point defunct because that would stop people downsizing again if they knew they were going to get hit with a tax bill. So the points contradict themselves. So I'm with you, Rob. I can't see any government bringing this in being particularly popular. So I can't see it happening. But then again, I didn't see rent controls happening either. So you never know. Depends what they've had for breakfast. Next up, ban or tax foreign investors. So up until recently, foreign investors actually had better tax conditions than UK residents. They didn't pay capital gains tax. So that's changing. But they are on parity in tax terms. They pay the same level of tax as ourselves. Places like Hong Kong have an increased tax for overseas outside buyers who buy into Hong Kong property to try and stop their bubble, because Hong Kong is a bit of a bubble as well. So would it work? If you'd asked me 2 years ago, I probably would have said it's a bad idea. But the way London has gone, maybe those controls need to come in. Not excessive, but maybe just something, just to make people think twice. Is this something that's a good investment? Or is it speculative? Because houses are lying empty in prime central London, which is just absolutely ludicrous. I don't think it's a bad idea, Rob. How it would be brought in and to what level we'd have to see, but I don't think it's a terrible idea in principle.
Yeah, I'd say that the other thing that London and Hong Kong have got in common, and Singapore, where there's a massive housing boom as well, is that they are small places with a finite amount of supply and a lot of demand because they're popular global cities. Are foreign investors really the problem? Or is it back to our old friend supply and demand again?
Well, that's an episode in itself, Rob. I think it's a combination of two. You know, we've both talked about the stat where 75% of new builds in London are bought by overseas investors. That high percentage does say there is a problem. How much it's affecting the market, though, is hard to quantify.
Okay, so number 6, the suggestion is an annual property tax. So I think the suggestion here is that a property tax that takes into account the value of the property replaces council tax. And this is similar to the US, again, where they tend not to have council tax as such, as far as I know, but they do have property taxes. So the idea being that people who have more expensive houses end up paying more because they can afford it. The flaw with this that has been suggested is it does mean that you have to revalue homes all the time. So if you take a dynamic market like London, in theory, your property taxes should be 7% higher now than they were in February. And that's never going to happen. You're not going to be able to have the expense and all the bureaucracy of revaluing things that often. So could this one work? I really don't know, to be honest. It's an interesting idea in its own right. Council tax, again, is something that's ripe for reform. But I don't know what effect it would have on calming the market.
Yeah, I agree, Rob. Council tax needs to be addressed, and maybe some different type of tax which is easier to understand and fairer would be a good idea. But cooling a market? I don't think so, unless it's very aggressive, and then it's not going to be too popular at all. So, yeah, reforms of council tax sounds like a good idea, but will it stop a super bubble? I doubt it. Okay, so next, I think this one's nonsense, Rob. It says, tax landlords more.
What?
So the idea behind this is if you tax landlords, then landlords might stop buying property, which will push up property prices. But the facts are that it's not UK investors driving up property prices. Of course, it will have an effect, but really the majority of the UK property market is supported by people buying from people. Yes, there are investors in there, but that's needed for the housing stock. Now, as we said on the rent controls, we're biased, but I just don't think that would work. I think landlords are needed to make sure there's good private rental stock. I don't see how that would cool the market, because the last boom, if we look back to the last boom as a case point, wasn't caused by investors. It was caused by people buying from people. Places like Ireland and Spain, when that went pop, the reason why it was hit so hard and still not recovered is because that was built on speculation. The UK market, as we've talked about supply and demand before, we don't build anywhere near enough homes. Would it make an impact? Possibly, but I don't think it's the right answer because it would cause problems elsewhere.
Yeah, we're biased on that one, but it doesn't sound like a good idea to me either. Not a fan of that one. Okay, so number 8 is to restrict mortgage lending. So in the residential market, there are tougher rules coming in about affordability. And the argument is that if you keep a tighter rein on mortgage lending, that's going to affect the amount people can borrow, the amount people can spend, and therefore house prices can't go up too far. The flaw with this is that, as the article says, 4 in 10 properties are bought with cash. So it's not going to have an impact on that at all. And I don't know the stats, but I would suggest that in London it might be higher than that. That's because what we're talking about here is a large part of it driven by overseas investors buying properties in prime central London with cash and the effect of that rippling out. I don't know if that would work. Also, mortgage lending was restricted for a few years anyway, and it didn't have a big effect in London. I mean, prices weren't going up quite like they were now, but London was still racing away while the rest of the UK stagnated or prices went down. So that backs up the point I just made. It's like it's not going to be an effective measure in London. So what you could say is it's sending a message of some kind. It could make some difference, but I don't know. As an instrument to affect London, it seems to have failed already in my book.
Yeah, I think restricting loan to value levels is no bad thing. You know, we've already seen buy-to-let mortgages getting back up to 85% levels, and it could even go beyond if competition continues to heat up. So I think sensible loan-to-value levels are a good idea, so that people can't buy with no money, because I don't think that's right. You're right, Rob, it's not going to solve the problem, but it might help the property market. It might help. But I don't think it's a silver bullet solution that's going to fix everything, but it could make an impact. Next one, this is quite interesting, Rob, is fill empty homes. There are a lot of empty homes. The article says that there are 630,000 homes that are lying empty in the UK. Even if they brought half of those back into use, then that's a year's supply without any additional building done, taken care of. Just half. It's easy to say it. It's probably near on impossible to do. It's a great idea, but how you would implement it, how you would push it forward, I think it would be very, very difficult. I do think it's a great idea. It's one of the best in the 10, but making it happen is easier said than done.
Yep, you're going to get no argument from me on that one. I think it's such an obvious solution. It must be a difficult thing to do. I don't understand quite why it's so difficult, but obviously it is. Otherwise, it would have been done already. It's politically bad. It's socially bad. No one wants to have all these empty homes. And it seems to me like it should be a good opportunity for everyone. Like, I'm sure if they were released, there'd be lots of private investors who'd be happy to spend the money that local authorities can't afford to spend on doing these properties up and getting them back into the rental market. It seems like it would be great for everyone. Obviously, it's not easy. Anything that could be done on that front would be a great win, and it would help out in all manner of ways, not just in terms of house prices, but everything else as well. And then the final point in the article, number 10, is all of the above. And that's obviously nonsense because some of them contradict each other.
Yeah, they got lazy on that one, Rob.
Yeah, it's a list of 10 sounded better than a list of 9. That's it for the article. But then we've added a couple of ideas of our own as well.
Okay, so the first suggestion we have is change the threshold for the Help to Buy scheme. To remove it from London, Lord Lawson's actually just commented in the last few days before we recorded this podcast that the threshold for the Help to Buy scheme should go down to 300,000, effectively removing it from most of London. I think that's a good idea. What I'd also add to that is I'd change the Help to Buy just for first-time buyers. Now, the majority of people who are using it actually are first-time buyers, but I think it should be, everyone using it should be first-time buyers. The Help to Buy scheme, lowering the threshold to 300,000 and then restricting it to first-time buyers only, I think will make a big difference. What you could do in place, Rob, for first-time buyers in London is remove stamp duty up to $500,000 for first-time buyers. So if you did that, I think that would get the market moving, because I know of a few people, friends even, that are priced out at 250. They've got properties that they like, which are the 280 range, and they're going to have to save for a few more months to get the stamp duty paid for as well.
Yeah, it's exactly what we were saying earlier about stamp duty kind of distorting things. I think it's a good idea. And what I like about the changes to Help to Buy that you suggested is that it's a more targeted solution. The fact is that the property market in the southeast is very different from the rest of the country. So any intervention that improves things in London might have unintended consequences elsewhere in the UK. The great thing about that is this would help out in London, and the same with your stamp duty point as well. It would help out in London without affecting anywhere else. So I like that one a lot. Another thing we've come up with, and I think this can be filed again under easier said than done, is to rebalance the UK economy so that there are more jobs and more investment outside London. So this comes back to the supply and demand point again. If all the jobs and all the opportunities are in London, everyone's going to want to live in London. And the only thing that can mean is that the prices are going to be pushed up. If you rebalance things and so you have an even split of jobs and opportunities across the UK, then the problem to a large extent sorts itself out. That is, of course, not an easy thing to do. And there is, of course, investment in the regions. But I think that anything else that can be done to even things out a bit can only be a good thing for both London and the rest of the country.
I agree. A simple one is transport links. If you can get to places like Manchester, Leeds, and of course Liverpool, Rob, then quickly, then it's going to make people go, well, we can set up there because we're still only an hour away. So if we can get journey times to an hour to that sort of axis of towns and cities further north, and then places like Birmingham and Nottingham and Sheffield, which are a bit closer or even less, then it can only be a good thing. I completely agree. I think transport links are a quick fix, and then super fast broadband everywhere else, so communication can be done really quickly as well too. Maybe I'm oversimplifying things, but I think if we just tackled those two things alone, that would make a big, big difference. I completely agree with your point, Rob.
So that's all the points that others come up with, and a couple of our own as well. I think what we've kind of concluded from this is that a lot of the proposals that have been made might help a little bit. Some of them feel like sort of fiddling around the edges a bit. The things that would really make a difference is bringing empty homes back into use, building more homes, and investing in infrastructure, investing outside London, and so on. Unfortunately, they are all big, difficult, expensive things to do.
They are. So, first of all, is there a super bubble? Well, the papers would say yes. There's certainly a bubble in London. There's no doubt about it. How big's that bubble got is hard to say, and how long will it go on for is even harder. But it's rippling out to different areas now, which will benefit. So that's for sure. Do things need to be done? Yes, they probably do. How many of these are realistic? Probably not many. But I think the Help to Buy scheme, which is one that wasn't even mentioned in the Guardian article, would make an impact straight away. So I wouldn't be surprised if the government in the next year or two does change that. But as far as we're concerned, the sooner they do that, the better.
Yep, so those are our ideas. We'd love to hear yours as well. So for every episode, we create a special topic inside the Property Hub where you can keep the conversation going. This time, if you go to thepropertyhub.net/bubble, there's going to be a link there that's going to take you over to that discussion. See what you think of the ideas that we've been talking about in this episode, and please add your own. It'll be great to hear what you think.
Okay, so on to our resource of the week. And Rob, you've dug up this resource this week, so where have you found this one from?
I must admit, Once again, we've got a listener to thank for this one. This wasn't mine. This comes from a listener, Matt, who emailed me the other day. And the app that he's told me about is RoomScan, and it's an app for your iPhone that draws floor plans. Now, he was telling me about this because he said he was at a viewing and the agent went and started tapping his phone against all the walls. And he thought, what is this nutter doing? And then, next thing he knew, the guy had a floor plan on his phone. And it turns out that there's this app called RoomScan, and all you have to do is tap your phone against each wall, and somehow it measures the distances between everything and draws a floor plan for you. I haven't used this app, so I don't know how well it works. But Matt seemed to think it seemed pretty effective, and I just think it's such an amazing idea. It seems totally futuristic to me. So I haven't tried it, but floor plans are a bit of a pain. So if you've got an iPhone, there's a free version of this app. It's got to be worth a try.
I just can't believe this is free. What a fantastic app. What a great age we live in, Rob. That's a fantastic app. I'm going to download that now. Thank you very much, Matt. That's a great, great resource. So next week, Rob, I'm flabbergasted that we've not covered this topic yet. I must talk about it daily to different investors, and we've talked about it a lot, and I think we've both blogged about it. It seems that we've never talked about it on the podcast.
Yeah, so it is flats versus houses, which makes the best investment. I don't know how we haven't talked about this, but we were doing a live Q&A last week, and someone said, have you thought about doing an episode about it? And we sort of looked at each other, or virtually looked at each other because we weren't together, and said, like, haven't we done that? I just couldn't believe it. So I went through all the list of our previous episodes, and we haven't. So we're going to be putting that right next week. We're going to be looking at the flats versus houses debate. And it is a debate that people sort of get quite passionate about. So we're going to be looking at all the factors in favour of each. It should be a really good one.
It should. So make sure you join us next week for that episode. But until then, make sure you get on the Property Hub. Go to thepropertyhub.net/bubbles. Make sure you join in the conversation. What do you think we can do to stop the super bubble? I love the media. Super bubble. But until next week, thank you for joining us once again, and we'll talk with you next Thursday. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to The Property Podcast. Make sure you join our mailing list at thepropertypodcast.com.
And remember, we love 5-star reviews. Rob even loves them more than air miles.